Thanks for checking out this show review video. So this is for Creepshow Season 4, Episode 2, and just like the first episode of this season, the screener that I got did not have the little bit with the creep in the beginning, so I cannot speak to whether I like that or not. I have not seen it at this point. Hopefully I can check it out when it's actually on Shudder. I mean, I will be able to. It'll just be like, do I remember to do that? But anyway, moving on, we have two more stories for this, like they do for all their episodes, and I have ratings for each of those two, so let's go ahead and get into it. The first story for Season 4, Episode 2 is called The Hat. Now, this one is directed by Kaylee Spear, who worked on two-sentence horror stories, Alien Ore, and the Mary Alice Brandon File, just to name a few things, as well as Sam Spear involved in the directing, and he worked on Two Sentences horror stories, Alien Ore, and the Mary Alice Brandon File. So I assume they're related somehow. Just spitballing there. This one's written by Byron Willinger, who wrote The Commuter. Also, Philip de Blasi, who also wrote The Commuter. So those two have been established to be working together. This story strikes a very playful tone with the writing and acting early on. It had this kind of like fun, light feeling to it. And it strikes that immediately, and it really does do a good job of maintaining that all the way through. You can tell that it was a very intentional thing to kind of keep it very light and jaunty to a degree. And that's not uncommon for these stories with the Creepshow series. I do like it when they kind of stray away and they get a little more serious, but I do expect this type of tone. So it does work for what they're going for with this, especially with the acting of the main character. He, I think, really helped out that kind of light feeling to it, and it worked. I mean, he did a good job. And I will say that overall, I mean, at this point, I've only watched 4 of the stories, 2 episodes of this season, but I feel like overall, the acting bar has been raised with this season. I don't know if that's going to continue with the other ones I'm doing, or watching, but yeah. Early on, it seems like a relatively boring premise. It is a very simple premise, unfortunately, and I think that ends up being one of the big problems with it is I don't think there was a whole lot that they figured out of where they could go with the story to keep it as interesting as it was. It's around a half an hour with its runtime, so with how simplistic the story is, you need to fill that out somehow. And I think they have a bit of a hard time filling it out. Unfortunately, what you end up getting is just a lot of the same. It just kind of starts retreading the same thing that you've seen over and over again. There are a lot of sequences that are something that you just saw a sequence of. And it's like, okay, we get the point. We can move on. These are short stories, so you don't need to add redundant scenes to it. And it just slows the pacing down. And that's one of the big issues with this one, in my opinion. There is some effectively used CGI in this. Now, with lower budget stuff like Creepshow is kind of on the lower budget side, it is common that CGI doesn't look so good. But they sparingly use some CGI in this. It is a little used kind of quickly, which also helps out. And it's very effective. So I was very happy with how the CGI use was. They make good use of the comic panels because for people who aren't familiar with the Creepshow series, they'll have a tendency to kind of go to the comic books and it'll be, that animation. Then they're just showing you comic panels to cover some of the story. And then it goes back to the real life acting. But they use it very effectively in this story in order to kind of move story, but not slow things down too much. But at the same time, like I said, it already kind of had pacing issues. So I guess it was good that they didn't mess up the pacing even more. But it's like still the pacing wasn't great. The directors enjoy using different camera shots and angles, you can tell. But they seem done at the wrong times. And it ends up detracting more than it ends up adding to the film. So it is one of those things where I appreciate trying to throw in, interesting camera angles, interesting camera shots. But there are times that they use it in this where you're kind of like, why are we doing this? And it ends up taking you out of the experience more than it ends up enhancing the experience because you can't figure out why they're doing it because it doesn't match the tone of what's going on. It's this very odd thing. I don't know why that was done, but those things feel off to me. And maybe it's just me. I don't know. It goes on for too long for what it is, and it starts to feel redundant. Like I said, there are literally redundant things. It literally feels like it's spinning its wheels for a while. It also feels like they just didn't know how to flesh out the script. They had this core concept, which, as I said, was very simple, and they just didn't know how to add more to it to keep people super interested. But might just be me again. There are some cool practical effects sequences. I really appreciated that. Always a big fan when I see some good practical effects, and especially since Greg Nicotero's involved with this, when the practical effects happen, they're pretty much always going to look good. So they do. Decent story in the end with a good moral for people today, and you'll see what I mean if you watch it. So I like the story. I like the acting. I like the practical effects. I like the use of the CGI. There's a lot of things I liked about it, but like I said, the pacing isn't great. It just seems like they were just going on too long, and that kind of killed it for me to a degree. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a 2.5 stars. I didn't love it for that reason. There's a lot of stuff that just didn't come together, but overall, I think it's, worth seeing. I thought it was solid enough. So now it brings me to the second story of the episode, and that is called Grieving Process. This one is also directed by Kaylee and Sam Spear. This one was written by Mike D. McCarty and John Esposito, who also worked together on the following stories for Creepshow: Graveyard Shift, Tale of the Mummy, The Walking Dead webisodes. Oh, I'm sorry, those first ones aren't from Creepshow. Graveyard Shift, Tale of the Mummy, The Walking Dead webisodes, then Creepshow episodes Model Kid, Night of the Paw, Within the Walls of Madness, Skeletons in the Closet, and Meter Reader, just so people know. Immediately, this plays off a fear that many people have, myself included. So that's always a good start to these, is endear itself to people in some way. Sympathize with fears that so many people have, and I think they really did a good job of kind of mining that type of material. So it's a good setup for it. There's some information given early on that probably shouldn't have been given that early because many people end up guessing exactly where the movie's going based off of that. Or maybe not exactly, but pretty closely to where it ends up going. And that kind of happened to me because and literally it's a little bit of information that when they give it to you, you literally do not need it right then. It just seems like this kind of thrown in thing that I think they were trying to hope that people would hear it and kind of think nothing of it, but it just sticks out too much with how the context of how it was brought up that you're just like, oh, okay, I see where this is going then. So I just kind of think they should have just not even had that in, not even move it, just don't have it in. It wasn't necessary. The acting is a mixed bag. The people that you need to be the best at their performances, I think, did a good job. The smaller roles, I think there were a few where it's a little shaky-ish. Not the best, but also not terrible, so serviceable, I would say. So a little bit of a mixed bag with the acting. I like how they handled lighting in this. Now, for people who've been watching my channel long enough, I like to comment when the use of lighting strikes me as being particularly good, and I think they did a good job with this because there are a decent amount of low light or dark sequences where you can see exactly what you need. It's handled properly. Nowadays, with a lot of horror movies, especially lower budget horror movies, there's this tendency to not light things properly, and it looks terrible, and it's frustrating when you can't see what you're trying to see. So kudos to them for handling this one properly. They did a good job with the lighting. Appreciate it. There is a tonal shift in this that really does work well. Now, I know I had commented on the 20 minutes with Cassandra, which was in the first episode of season 4, that there was this tonal shift that felt kind of like off, and I was like, I don't know about this. It ended up kind of panning out. But for this one, when the tonal shift happens, it is welcomed. It feels like it immediately works. So I was a fan of what they decided to do with that tonal shift. So that was pretty nice. It has a real nice but brief practical effects moment, but you end up getting a little bit more of it later. So First when I saw it, I was just like, oh, because I get excited for practical effects. I was like, oh, practical effects, and it looks so good. But it was so brief, and I was just like, oh man, I hope that's not all it is. Rest assured, you will see some more of it, and for a longer length, so you do get to kind of feast your eyes on how it looks a bit more, which is always nice. The ending is decent for this too. I thought it was a pretty solid ending. Now, the story didn't blow me away or anything, but I thought it was effective enough. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a 3-star rating. So obviously it was the better of the 2 stories for me personally for this episode. So those are all my thoughts on Creepshow Season 4, Episode 2. Just know that on the day that I dropped this, I dropped all episodes. So you can check out all 6 episode reviews. Have fun with that. Do me a quick favor, though. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I 100% appreciate that. Also, hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 3 or 4 a week at this point. But thank you so much for watching this, and until next time, keep it brutal.